Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 229 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and a two-time author. Our second book, From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing, is available now on Amazon. So go and pick up that book. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, we love pets here at Greek University. Our mascot for a couple of years was our male Siberian cat, Klondike, and he was such a big help to brighten our spirits during the isolation of the pandemic that we decided to adopt another Siberian cat. This time it was Coco, a female Siberian that was also a little over 2 years old. So if you're into cats, I will tell you this is the best breed because they follow you around like dogs and they are completely hypoallergenic for any of our listeners that have bad allergies. I can't imagine life without these two troublemakers every morning. So give Siberians a shot if you're looking for a new cat friend for your home. Today, the show has gone to the dogs. Our next guest is Larry Grogan. For 8 years, he and his dog Scrappy were a pet therapy team at a local children's hospital. But when Scrappy passed away, Larry turned to writing as his personal therapy. 2 years later, he published A Tale of Love, Life Lessons from Scrappy, a Pet Therapy Dog, which chronicles many of her life-saving stories. Their mission is to share with the world the power of pet therapy dogs so that more people can live their lives as Scrappy would want them to. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Hey, this is going to be a lot of fun. I mean, for me to talk about pets with our listening audience, it's certainly not every day for me, but I got to tell you, I love this story and I just think it's going to warm everybody's heart. So it's really a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Now, you decided on North Carolina State University. I'm sure our listeners want to know what made you decide that that was the right place for you.
Well, it was pretty easy. Number one, I'm from North Carolina, so it was in-state and it was affordable. So, that was a big deal. But it was an interesting selection because the way I actually made it was I had some recruiters that came to our high school physics class. And they were from the School of Textiles at North Carolina State. And so, they gave a good pitch. And so I decided to try it out.
I love it. I think that's great. You know what? Listen, I made the same choice at the University of Buffalo for the same reasons. I was living in New York and it was cheap. I mean, it was really good return on investment. It was a great education for a very small amount of money. And so my dad made me really appreciate that. He said, you don't want to be in debt, thousands and thousands of dollars and paying, all these bills back for the rest of your life. And you know what? I mean, I think it was good advice and ultimately, it worked out great. Now I have a couple of kids. I have a 15-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old son that are looking at which college they want to go to. And so I'm trying to impart the same wisdom to them, go in state, save a few bucks. But you know what? Listen, they've got a mind of their own and they're incredibly bright. They're certainly much brighter than I am. They take after my wife. And so it's interesting to see it through their lens because, I'm sure you and I have our own thoughts on it. But they're their own individual people, and so just trying to support them as best I can. So we'll see. It's going to be expensive. It's a lot more expensive to go to school today than it was when you and I went to school.
There's no doubt. I don't know how people afford it anymore, to be perfectly honest with you. My best friend, his kids went to UGA, two of them.
Yeah.
And there was an overlap for a couple of years. I was like, phew.
It's hard. I mean, it is really, really hard to make all of that work. But, I really love your book. You wrote the book, A Tale of Love, Life Lessons from Scrappy, a Pet Therapy Dog. And for 8 years, you and your dog Scrappy were a pet therapy team at this local children's hospital. I'm just wondering, what made you get into pet therapy?
Well, it was really interesting because we moved to Tennessee. That's where we are. We're in East Tennessee. We moved from upstate New York. And but we moved here sight unseen. We didn't know anything about the area that much. We didn't know any people. And Scrappy was just one of those animals that just loved people. And so I learned about the Children's Hospital, learned about the pet therapy program, and just thought that she would be a good match. And so we learned how to get into it and went through all the training. And, the rest is kind of history, as they say. But the training was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of obedience. And just loved going in with Scrappy because her best buddy there was a Great Dane. And so they would sit right next to each other. Now, Scrappy was 5 pounds, and that was with all her fur. So to see her nuzzle up to this Great Dane, it was a Mutt and Jeff kind of moment, but it was just great, and they just loved each other, and so it was a good time.
That's great. I'm sure Scrappy in her head probably thought that she was a Great Dane, right? Like she didn't see any difference in her mind.
She wasn't intimidated. Let me put it that way.
That's so fascinating, and it really tells you a lot about Scrappy and how she viewed herself, I think. And so, how did Scrappy become your EVP of Sales and Marketing?
Well, that's the fun story. I own an investment firm. I mean, that's what I do every single day. I manage money for clients. And the way that I built my practice was I was starting to work with engineering associations. And so I landed a contract with 4 engineering associations that had a total of 600,000 engineers that I could market to every day. And one of the things that I would do for them is I would attend their annual conferences. And part of it was I would make educational presentations. Every single day was a different presentation, but then they would set up a table for me in their convention area and allow me to have some literature out and that type of thing. Scrappy came with me all the time. She was a well-traveled pet. And so I would put her on top of the table and just let her sit there. Well, being the little dog that she was, she would get excited if someone would look her way. And she would just kind of sit up a little bit and the tail would start to wag. And I, in business school, they tell you if you're going to start a business, it needs to be a niche business. Well, I wasn't doing anything niche other than the people I was serving. But what I really did was niche marketing, because Scrappy was the hook. So they would see Scrappy at the table and come over and start petting. And so that gave me the opening to start talking with them about, what I do, how we do it differently, and why they might want to consider working with us. And so, one weekend she closed like $5 million of assets, just like that. It was great. So she automatically became my EVP of Sales and Marketing. But she was that hook. She was what got people to the booth so that I could engage in some conversation.
I completely understand where you're coming from there. There's a company, not a direct competitor, but somebody that always comes to the various exhibit halls that we exhibit at. And sure enough, he brings his dog, who is super well trained, doesn't need a leash or anything. I mean, just would be right on the right hip of his owner at all times and right in front of the exhibit hall booth. And wouldn't you know it, all the college students are coming to pet this dog. And I'm sitting over there next to him going, oh my God, like nobody's even giving me a second look, but they make a beeline right for the dog. I mean,
you gotta take Klondike with you.
I know. I'm thinking about it, but I don't know if Klondike would sit still. I mean, Klondike would just be off to the races, and who knows where Klondike would be. But yeah, that's certainly a great story, and I love every minute of it. But listen, I understand that at the end of life, this could be a very difficult thing for pet owners. And so on Sunday, June 30th, 2019, this was really the worst day of your life. You lost your friend, you lost your companion, you lost a major part of your identity. Mm-hmm. And I know that you're never going to get over her. I know that for life. I mean, that's never going to go away. What are some of the conversations that you can have to help family members when you're grieving over the loss of a pet?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think one thing that happens sometimes, we try to get over it too quickly and just move right along. And that was far from my experience. So for me, I really went through 3 phases. One was just the emotional side of things, and I'm still dealing with that. To have that time to cry, get those emotions out. And when I talk to parents, that's the one thing that I really stress is allow your children to cry. There's no shame in that.
Yeah.
And it allows those emotions to come to the surface. It allows you to have some conversations about, what you love about your pet, the things that you're going to miss about your pet. And then the reflection side of things was really where the writing came into place. I would sit and just write her little notes. I'd literally just tear off a corner of a piece of paper and just write a little note. And then those notes became letters, and those letters became stories. And ultimately, that's what created the book, was, combination of all the notes and letters and stories. And so reflection was really the second phase for me of getting over the loss, but then also moving on to a celebration side of her life. And that's the legacy side. And that's really my mission now, is to not only tell Scrappy's story and talk about how great she was and all the wonderful things that she did as a pet therapy dog, but to encourage people to become a pet therapy team. We just do not have enough pet therapy dogs for the demand that's out there. And COVID really put a huge need on emotional support animals, pet therapy dogs, whatever the case might be. And so that's my mission now. It's really just to use our book as a basis of understanding how meaningful pet therapy can be and how wonderful it can be to walk in and help someone who's having a bad day turn it around 180 degrees.
What a wonderful mission. I really like that a lot. And, on college campuses, one of the most popular events that I see out there, they call it Rent a Puppy. And essentially all it means is that, there's this kennel set up in the middle of campus where they bring in a bunch of adoption dogs from a local dog shelter, and they just let the students play with the pets, raise a couple of bucks for the shelter because, they're all underfunded and don't have enough money to do what they need to do. But ultimately the students, what they get out of it, especially around midterms or finals, is they just get, some sense of therapy and relief, and to be able to play with these dogs and just have the dogs lick them. And, they're all excited to see humans. It's a really great relationship, and it's a great thing, I think, on college campuses, just to relieve stress. And I think, to your point, during the pandemic, the mental health needs are just off the charts for college students at that particular time. Many of them had been living in isolation for months and months and months and months. So having a pet on campus really is just a tremendous thing. So I love where you're going with it. I think it's fantastic. The other thing that Scrappy taught you about is that exploration is the key to life learning. How so?
Well, the way that I write about it is the fact that, most dogs, unfortunately, are confined to their own space. It could be the house that they're in or the backyard that's fenced in, whatever the case might be, and they don't have that opportunity to get out and explore to see what else is out there. Scrappy was just the opposite. Like I said, we traveled together by every means you could possibly imagine. In New York, we'd take the train down to the city. We'd take the cabs. We stayed in hotels. We flew all over the country together. So, and even boats, taking, the ferry across the river occasionally from New York to New York City, or New Jersey, to New York City. So she was very accustomed to movement. One of her favorite things is when we'd take the metro from New York, or from Poughkeepsie, New York, down to New York City. And I'd put her on the inside seat. And it was like watching a tennis match. Her little head was just going back and forth, just watching the people get on and off the train. She just absolutely loved it. And people were fascinated by just watching her. But we gave her that opportunity to explore and see and be in new environments. And in my opinion, I think those environments allowed her to be a better pet therapy dog. There was nothing that happened in that hospital that ever startled her, nothing. And it didn't matter if it was the children that she was sitting with or the noises that are constantly, in a hospital room, when the alarms go off, if there's an emergency, nothing ever startled her. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that we did travel so much and she was exposed to so many different places, things, and people, that it just allowed her to develop and learn and appreciate everything around her. So I like to refer to that as pooping as many yards as you can. You know, if you've got the opportunity to get outside your own fence, you can explore different yards, and you know, you still have to pick it up, but it allows you to get out there and see what's different, and just have an appreciation for what's around you. And then, you know, as humans, we can take the same approach. You know, if we don't get out of our backyards, we never had the opportunity to appreciate what else is out there. We don't have the ability to learn different things, accept different views, and just become better humans.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think one of the best parts about my job is just traveling from college campus to college campus all over the country and visiting with different states and different people and different opinions. And another reason why I love the travel abroad program that many of these universities have, to be able to get out and visit other countries and understand their cultures. I think all of that is just so very important. And I hope that college students are going to take advantage of those types of opportunities as early as they can and not wait, because there's no time like the present.
I agree. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about these pet therapy programs. I know 60% of colleges and universities have these pet therapy programs. So talk to us a little bit about some of the institutions that have pet therapy programs, how all of that is going.
Well, it's really amazing how many different schools are using pet therapy. You know, you mentioned the ability to kind of rent a pet.
Yeah.
Yale Law School does just that. They've got a dog at the library, and you can go in for 20, 30 minutes, up to 4 people, and rent the little puppy and have a good time and play with them. University of Minnesota, Iowa, Rochester Institute of Technology. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, the different locations where there are animals. And it varies depending on the institution to the degree of how much exposure the pet therapies actually have. A lot of them are scheduled events, like you alluded to. They tend to come together pre-final exams, you know, time period when everybody's studying so hard, and provide that little bit of stress release to kind of refocus, re-energize. And that's really what pet therapy is all about. It's interesting, the body goes through a transformation whenever a dog is around. And when you start petting a dog, the body produces or releases a hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin is designed to reduce stress and tension. It's good for your health. It reduces your heart rate, and just has a lot of health benefits associated with it. And so the universities that are incorporating pet therapy programs do it in a couple different ways. One of them, they'll have these scheduled events where they notify everybody on campus where and when dogs will be, so that they can gain access to them. I know here where I am, East Tennessee State University actually has a pet therapy dog as part of their social work department. And so the dog is there in their offices. So when you have issues that you need to discuss with a counselor, the dog is right there with you. And I think the dog allows the opportunity for the students to lower their barriers, you know, discuss the things that are really troubling them, whether it's school or other social atmospheres or aspects of life that are just creating unnecessary stress, and just allows that conversation to begin and open up, and hopefully find the help that they need. But that dog is really important to allow that door to open up.
Those health benefits are just so important. I mean, I wish 100% of the colleges and universities would have a pet therapy program. I mean, I don't see any downside to this at all. You know, so to me, it's almost baffling. Why is it not at every campus?
Well, you're right, and you raise a great point. And here's something to elaborate as to why there isn't more. If you think about it, there's only 50,000 certified pet therapy dogs in the U.S., but there's 70 million students. So if you take into consideration kindergarten all the way up to university level, that's 70 million students. That's one dog for 1,400 students. It's absolutely impossible.
Right.
So that's why we've got to have more people get involved in pet therapy, understand the benefits, the medical benefits of pet therapy. And here's one that the universities need to consider. One of the studies that I found showed that of the students that participated in pet therapy programs, there was 100% retention of those students, whereas the national average is a 40% dropout rate. Oof. So financially, for the universities, I mean, how much do they spend on marketing per student every year? So if we can find a way to reduce that, get better students, mentally stronger, help students as well, financially, the universities are going to do better. So they've got every incentive in the world to try to get this into their system. And what does it cost them? Zero.
Right.
So, it's a nice program to have. It does wonderful things for everybody involved. And believe it or not, there's going to be a financial gain for every university that does it as well, too.
You make some great points. You have some excellent arguments. So I'm so happy that we're having you on the show, because I think we'll be able to get that word out to say that this really should grow. We need to grow this pet therapy program. I also wanted to ask you, what's the difference between therapy dogs and service dogs?
Great question, because there is a lot of confusion. And honestly, there can be some overlap, but here's the fundamental difference. Service dogs are trained to perform a very specific function. So, for example, children with autism or anyone with autism, there are certain dogs that can be trained to detect when someone's going to have an episode, whether it's a seizure or any type of bad event. And so they have the ability to detect in advance of those events happening. And that's what a service dog is all about. That's one side of a service dog. Or a service dog could be trained to flip on a light switch for someone that could be partially paralyzed or something, or open the door. That's the service side. Pet therapy is really some people call them emotional support dogs. And in some ways, that's really what they are. Pet therapy is really there to provide compassion to that person that they are allowing to pet on them, and just be that friend in need that someone needs at that point in time, and just allow them to stroke their back, pet their chin, pat the top of their head, whatever the case might be. And as we said earlier, it just creates that release of oxytocin that just brings the stress level down. And that's really what pet therapy dog is all about. When we would visit children in the children's hospital, it was really amazing, because you would walk in with Scrappy and you could just see the eyes, the faces of those children begin to light up. And you can just automatically see a better feel in that little body. They just knew they were going to have a good time. And so a pet therapy dog also becomes a distraction. It allows you to think of something else instead of what you're currently dealing with, and provide that release for everybody.
Yeah, that's really great information. So thank you for sharing that and clearing that up. One of the other things that I see often when we talk about either, pet therapy dogs or even service dogs is, like, every once in a while I'll see an article about some confrontation, some conflict in a fraternity house, a sorority house. Maybe there is a pet therapy dog or a service dog in the house. And then there's other people that might be allergic to the dog or something like that. So now we have this situation where one party wants the dog, the other party does not want the dog. What are the rules and regulations that are in place at colleges and universities about having a therapy dog in your dorm, your fraternity house, your sorority house? I want to make sure I understand all of the issues, all the rules and the regulations.
Yeah, and that's honestly, that is an issue, because everybody's got different rules and regulations. And so from a dog perspective, a service dog or a pet therapy dog, just to understand, those are animals that have gone through very specific and very diligent training. This isn't just a dog that came from someone's home. You can't necessarily call them a service dog or a pet therapy dog. These animals have gone through very rigorous training to achieve the level of service that they were asked to do. So from that perspective, there's got to be some clarification on the institution's part as to what's acceptable and what isn't. And so that's where it gets a little hazy sometimes. But most of the pet therapy programs that universities have in place, the dog is there for a limited amount of time and then it goes home with its handler. The dog's never there by itself. There's always someone that brings the dog there. And so that removes a lot of the requirements necessary that universities have to keep in place. Service dogs, on the other hand, if you've got a student that resides on campus with a service dog, that's something that the university just has to say, all right, here's someone that is required to have this dog to perform their daily functions. And if you're going to be in the same suite or the same room with this animal, you've got to understand these requirements and know what your limitations are with regards to allergies and that type of things too. I've read articles, particularly on the counseling side, where counselors may put sheets or something, covers on the furniture if the dog wants to get up on the couch with someone. But there just has to be a general understanding and publications in advance so that if you go into a counselor's office, you know that there's a dog here. If you're not comfortable with the dog there, then you've got a decision to be made. And maybe you can go outside and have that counseling session, weather permitting. So there's got to be a lot of flexibility because right now the rules are they're wide open. It's just whatever that institution says. And there's not a governing body when it comes to the dog's perspective as to what's acceptable and what isn't. The dogs are there to provide whatever service they can provide and gladly do it. And so they're not worried about whatever the restrictions are. That's an institutional issue that just really has to be thought about well in advance and then notify everybody on campus. The beautiful thing about universities now, long before you and I ever went to school, everybody's got a cell phone.
Yeah.
And so, we didn't have that. I certainly never had that. And so, all these alerts from the university can go immediately to every single student. So if there's a dog, somewhere, that alert can go out and be notified instantly.
Yeah, I'm coming away from this conversation thinking that we need much more pet therapy dogs out in the world. And so, I'm thinking about a listener right now that might be looking at their dog saying, man, this dog loves being around people, loves meeting new people, loves to travel. And so, where can our listeners go to get more information about pet therapy?
Great question again. And what you just said is really the most important thing. You've got to have a dog that loves to be around people. So if you're interested in pursuing a pet therapy team approach with your dog, the first thing I would ask you to do is think about where you want to go with that dog, because that's going to have different requirements as well. So if you're going to a university, they're going to have certain requirements. If you're going to a nursing home, they're going to have certain requirements. If you go to a children's hospital, they're going to have even more requirements. So the first thing you need to do is just understand where you want to travel with your pet therapy dog. Second thing is, once you've identified that location, contact that location, find out what their specific requirements are. Because again, unfortunately, it may be different depending on where you go, children's hospital versus nursing home, for example. But for the most part, the first thing that you want to do is be certified obedience tested. Now, this isn't anything real restrictive, but you've got to demonstrate that your dog understands certain commands. And probably the two most important commands are no and leave it. And why this is important is when we would go to the children's hospital, sometimes things spill, medicines spill. And if you see it, you certainly don't want your dog to lick it up. So you've got to leave it. So in our training, they would put a hot dog in the middle of the floor and you had to walk within so many feet And you just constantly say, leave it, leave it, leave it, and just make sure that, Scrappy kept walking by. So that's very important. The second phase is the willingness of the dog to be around people. Make sure that they're not going to be freaked out by someone coming up from behind, touching their feet, touching their ears. So that's a very important thing. And then the third phase has to do with the handler. Remember, this is a team. It takes two. And so the handler has to demonstrate their ability to work with their dog. But the real important thing about the handler is there will be a background check done. We can't have people walking into a children's hospital or nursing home that have bad backgrounds. So that's got to be done. And then really the fourth phase is once you go into one of these facilities, you need to be monitored. There's got to be someone there to kind of observe you, see how you work, see how you perform, and just make sure that you and your dog are going to be a good fit for that location. Wow. So where can you go? You can go to places like American Kennel Club. That's a good place. Therapy Dog International is where Scrappy and I did our training. And then the last one is Alliance of Therapy Dogs Institute as well.
Great resources, great information. Now I have a very clear picture of what's involved. And you can see, there's a considerable amount of training and checks and all kinds of things that need to happen to really get into pet therapy. And so I'm glad that there is, to make sure that we have a good fit for the team, the dog and the handler. I think all of that is so important. Now, we do love good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I know you originally spent some time in Saratoga Springs, New York. Now you're over in Johnson City, Tennessee. And so I want to know, when I visit the east side of my state, Tennessee, where should I be going to eat?
Michael, this is going to be a treat. You can't go to just one. You know that. So we're going to start at a little place called Yeehaw Brewery. It's a local microbrew. They've got pretty good beer there, so we'll have a few beers. Attached to them is a place called White Duck Tacos. They got great tacos, so we'll have a few tacos. But what's cool about Yeehaw Brewing is such a chilled, laid-back atmosphere. It's a huge facility. You can sit inside or outside by the fire pits. You can go out back, play a little bocce ball, cornhole, whatever it is that you want to do. Now, from there, we got to make a little bit of a decision, because we can either go have a good Southern barbecue place at Southern Craft Barbecue, or we go do the traditional wings and sports bar type thing. But either one's very good. But then we're going to end the evening at a place called Watauga Brewery, and we're going to go up on the roof, and we're going to hang out on the roof on a nice evening, have some nice beers, watch the trains go by, and just kind of have a nice chill effect to the end of the evening.
Larry, you're my kind of guy. Clearly you've thought this out. You know exactly where you're going. This is the kind of guy that we need in every city to say, all right, we're going to give you the grand tour. It's not going to be just one place. We're going to go to like 5. Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? You only live once. You might as well enjoy, everything that life has to offer, especially when it comes to food. I'm not bashful, and I'll try just about everything. And yeah, having tacos and barbecue and going to the Yeehaw Brewery, absolutely. It's all
gotta love it. Gotta love it.
All right, Larry.
Tennessee, my friend.
Yes, a great place. I know. So, all right, this has been so much fun, Larry, and so informative. I'm so happy that we had the opportunity to sit down together. So if people want to connect with you, if they want to pick up your book, or maybe they want to book you as a speaker, where should they go to connect with you?
Great, thank you. Go to ataleoflove.com, whatever it may be. That's TAIL, ataleoflove.com.
I love it. ataleoflove.com. And then, of course, tail, it's the dog tail, TAIL. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Larry. This has been so much fun. And, I think about Scrappy and I think about, the love that you have for her. And I know that's going to continue forever. I know that she's never going to leave your heart. So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for talking about pet therapy and how important that is that we grow this program. I've learned so much. So I really appreciate your time.
Hey, I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, yes, my pleasure. And to all of our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation about Larry and Scrappy, please make sure to like this on social media. Please make sure that you share this with other students, other people in the pet industry, people that might be interested in pet therapy. Please share this with them. And we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much for coming by, and we'll see you next time.